Okay, good afternoon everybody. Thank you very much for attending this meeting this afternoon of Place Scrutiny Committee and dealing with the RLDP. So without further ado, I would like to ask apologies of absence. I don't believe we have any.
None received today, Chair. No.
Thank you. Declarations of interest?
As and when, I suppose.
As and when? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and then public open forum. I believe there's Bridget O'Hara would like to speak, but I don't think she's online as of yet. No, so in which case, if it's all okay with everybody, I'd like to move straight away to David Cummings. Thank you very much.
Speech opposing the inclusion of candidate site 0270HA4 in the RLDP by David Cummings, Chair of the Gateway to Wales Action Group in Monmouth. Good afternoon. The infrastructure plan in 2013 for a previous LDP was 37 pages. Lack of infrastructure was an issue for this committee on the 28th of September 2023 and influenced your vote. Now we have a last-minute infrastructure plan of less depth than 2013 that contains a lot of if-possibles and will be considered during the planning process. Appendix 8 Infrastructure Delivery Plan, page 316, says houses on our Monmouth site will be zero carbon emissions. How is that possible when on the developer's website they only commit to zero emission houses by 2050? Phosphate discharge in the catchment area for this site is already exceeding permissible levels. Sustainable drainage systems do not take out all phosphates. The change to housing from grazing land will increase phosphate runoff. The discharge will enter the River Wye upstream of where our drinking water is extracted from. Welsh Water are already under 2 notices from NRW about the quality of our water. Would you want to drink even more polluted water? Social housing companies in England are nearly bankrupt. Are we sure here in Monmouthshire that Pobble, Mellin and MHA have sufficient funds to cover such an ambitious building programme and fund the gap between the Welsh Government grant and the total cost? Why can't the 270 plus houses for Monmouth be added to the mixed-use Abergvenny site, which has increased in size 45% since September 2023 RLDP was issued? On this site, you can now build 1,225 houses if the commercial side were moved to the 10-acre empty chicken production facility down the road. MCC and Councillor Griffiths want to promote developments to create the 15-minute town. Sustrans say people will not walk or cycle more than 800 metres to shop. Why is the Monmouth site being considered when it is 2,000 metres from the town centre? Compare this to the Abergvenny site, just 10 minutes from a railway station with national connections and only 15 minutes from the town centre. There is much frantic activity by surveyors on our preferred strategy candidate site in Monmouth. We are worried that in the introduction to the RLDP it states that once adopted, the RLDP will replace the existing LDP adopted and will become the framework against which decisions on planning are made. Could the planning application for HA4, if votes go against us, be submitted as early as 25th of October this year? I and the vast majority of Monmouth residents who have expressed an opinion about site HA4 hope that the committee will vote against the RLDP in its current form. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Okay, right, so that moves us on to Jonty Pierce, if you'd be so kind. And Jonty has some slides for us to see as well, for us all to be aware. So a bit of techno about to happen, guys. Thank you, Jonty. When you're ready.
Good afternoon, Councillor. Do I need to stand here?
Well, yes, okay. Loudly.
Sorry. Thank you. Good afternoon, councillors. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I am worried that Monmouthshire County Council has selected the wrong candidate site for housing in Monmouth. Next slide, please. At the Scrutiny Committee meeting 12 months ago, the Council highlighted 3 candidate sites. On the right-hand side, here is candidate site CS0270 on the Dixton Road. It is a special site. It is a beautiful location. It is the setting of Monmouth, and is the first view of our town that many people see, particularly people coming from England driving across the border. Monmouth is the jewel in the crown of the surrounding countryside. It is a sensitive site for a number of reasons, and here's a few examples. It feeds Monmouth's endangered bats at Newton Court, the greater horseshoe bats. It is one of only 3 sites in Wales and the only one in Monmouthshire. It is in the setting and highly visible from the Wye Valley area of outstanding natural beauty. I think it's now called a natural landscape. And the land map value is outstanding for cultural landscapes and high for visual and sensory. It is also less than 500 metres from a scheduled ancient monument at Dixton Mound. In comparison, site CS0274, which is a site here, on the Wannistow Road, is a less sensitive site. It has both housing and employment facilities, and is next to a new housing site. Next slide, please. I have lots of objections. Today I just want to focus on one objection, and that is the loss of prime agricultural land. Planning Policy Wales says that if there is a choice of sites, the site with the lowest grade of land should be selected. Next slide, please. Here's a view of the site at Dixton Road. It is prime agricultural land. It is 80% grade 2 land, and that is the highest grade of land around Monmouth. Next slide, please. Here's the slide of the Wannistow Road site, CS0274. That is predominantly 3A land, which is a lower grade of agricultural land. So that is just one reason why I believe that the Wannistow Road site should be selected. Next slide, please. I am concerned that the advantages of the Wannistow Road site may not have been fully considered. At the Wannistow Road site, there is inclusion for 2 hectares of employment land. It is also very close to 2 industrial estates, which mean that people can walk to work. It is better served by active travel. There's actually a national cycle route goes past the entrance of the site, and it also suffers from few of the disadvantages that the Dixton Road site has. I've made a comparison of the 2 sites here. I won't go through those in detail. I have put all of that into my detailed report, which has been emailed to everyone. I do have 3 copies of that report here if anyone wants to thumb through that, so I leave that open to you. I would urge you as councillors to vote against the inclusion of CS0270 Dixton Road in the LDP, as once the Dixton Road site is developed, a special environment is gone forever. If you'd like to be briefed on any of my objections, I'm more than happy to do that. Or if you'd like to visit the setting of either of the sites, I would be happy to arrange that for you. Thank you, councillors, for your time.
Thank you, Jonty.
Would anyone like a paper copy of the report?
Emma would, and Paul Griffiths would as well. Louise, did you want one?
One more copy if anyone has it.
It's all right, Jonty, don't rush. You're all right. Okay, thank you very much, Jonty. Okay, so the next person, please, is Frank O'Brien. Bruhaney, I said that wrong, didn't I? Do apologise. When you're ready, Frank.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and Chair. Thank you for the opportunity for me to speak to the developments at Leesbrook CS 0270 and policy HA4 and traffic emissions. I initially refer you to policy S8 and the generic statement of incorporating satisfactory air quality measures to mitigate and/or reduce emissions. Added to that are additional measures on traffic emissions, and these are stated within HA1, 3, 5 and 11. But residential amenity is strangely absent from HA4. I believe that this arises from a failure to go beyond the wide discretion encouraged within the LAQM, which MCC relies upon for its monitoring activities in Monmouth. Whilst I understand MCC's imperative to primarily monitor for nitrogen dioxide, it only presents part of the emissions problem in Monmouth. Let me guide you to a finding from a short study monitor placed by Monmouth School and the A40 in 2015, where it was found that both PM10 and PM2.5 presented themselves as continuous sources within Monmouth's environment. I cannot detect that there has been a continual monitoring for those particular chemical compounds. The methodology of monitoring in Monmouth is flawed by reference to the LAQM, and when the current data set is presented against HA4, for which I have not seen any risk assessment as required by paras 430 to 432 of the LAQM, it strongly suggests that HA4 suffers a fundamental deficit of officials' emissions data. In other words, we cannot truly understand the environmental and health issues presented against this proposed development because of a failure in official monitoring methodology and in data. Equally, I have not seen deployed the precautionary principle and indeed the leading case and the findings from the Ella case. In conclusion, I urge MCC to reconsider CS 0270 and HA4 and to either reject this development for lack of data on real or projected emissions, or alternatively to import a stronger HA3 narrative on residential amenity into HA4 and to bring about a better methodology and data set before considering approval for this development. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much to the members of the public there. You're more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. In point of fact, you might want to enjoy it, I don't know. And we will have little breaks throughout, so hopefully it'll be okay for you. But thank you very much for attending. and look forward to hearing all your responses to all that happens. Okay. Everyone. All right, so in reference to all of these things as well, we've had quite a few written submissions to us as a committee. At the present, the ones that are writing against CS 0270 is a lady by the name of Susan White, a gentleman by Michael Martin, Mrs. Gaylold, Marilyn Harris, Emily Witham, Andrew Jones and Bridget O'Hara, Kate Harcourt, Jane Bohannon, Terry and Barbara Newbury, James Guy, Sarah Jane Bryn, Alison Powell, Sue Thomas, Susan Reid and Liz Callicott. We've also had a couple of submissions from Barrett and Davis Wilson's homes, 2 representations, one about the land at Mountbatten and another about the land west of Usk Pempenary. Sorry, I said it incorrectly. So all that information will be passed forward to the Cabinet and then obviously into full council meeting, I assume, in a fortnight's time. Okay, and I don't know, there'll probably be more still to come. Okay, thank you very much on that bit. Now, without further ado, I believe it's time to move to our Cabinet member, Paul Griffiths, and of course, our Head of Planning and Planning Policy, is it? I'm trying to remember your actual title. Craig O'Connor. Thank you.
I'm hoping to do so with the aid of some slides, and they'll become available now. So if we move to the second slide. What I've set out, or has been set out in the second slide there, is the overall vision which is informing the proposals which are before the committee today and put in the public domain a week ago. The key theme, I think, is that the proposals aim to provide an appropriate supply of housing and jobs for younger and more sustainable communities. The stress that I put on there is the objective of creating a younger community. And it's there in the report, when you look at the demographic trends, not just of the last decade, the data for the last decades, they've been over several decades. We see a situation where the school-age population has continued to decline. In the last decade, it declined by 7%. You compare that with neighbouring authorities, it is a far more severe decline. Newport growing rapidly, us declining, I suggest, rapidly at the same time. It will make all aspects of our communities less sustainable were that to continue. The working age population in that decade declined by 4%. And is projected to decline even more rapidly unless there is intervention. In contrast, as you know, the over 65 population is growing. In a decade, it grew by 26%. Take those trends together, and I believe we have unsustainable communities in an unsustainable county. We have a situation where ever more people like me, by the time this plan comes, I'll be over 75, people like me who cannot be supported by the number of people of working age in the community. The services that I need, the businesses that I need would not be sustainable around me. The plan is designed to reverse those demographic trends. One way it aims to do that is by increasing the supply of housing and of affordable housing in particular. We are losing young people in the county. because those young people do not have access to the housing that they can afford. This is, in my experience, in all sorts of profiles of young people, all sorts of skill sets, are simply finding whether they're a manual worker, whether they're a teacher, whether they're a health worker or a care worker, they cannot access housing in the county. They move out, sometimes moving back in to commute in for a job in the county. The local housing needs assessment that has been undertaken has given us the figure that 50% of the Monmouthshire population cannot afford to purchase on the open market. And we shouldn't be surprised when the average open market price of a home in Monmouthshire is well nigh £400,000. 50% cannot access the housing market. And that explains why the proposal is to provide 50% affordable housing to try and redress that balance. So the plans that are in the proposals are that we would, over the 15-year period of the plan, increase the supply of housing by 2,000 homes, and that 1,000 of those will be affordable. I'm often asked what affordable means, and the answer depends on local market circumstances. In the case of Monmouthshire, affordable for at least a third of the population does not mean discounted market housing. It means social housing for rent, which is why the proposal are that of the 1,000 extra homes over the planned period, 660 would be social housing for rent. 330 would classify as intermediary, low-cost home ownership, shared ownership, a range of options there. Those figures are not plucked out of the air. They are derived from the assessment of the actual circumstances of the population in Monmouthshire. So the theme there of 50% affordable housing, it is a Wales first. No other local authority in Wales has been as prescriptive as we will be or as ambitious as we will be. But we will deliver because of the particular circumstances of Monmouthshire. The viabilities have been undertaken site by site. Putting it basically, because of the profit that can be made on the market housing site by site, it is viable to expect the developers to provide 50% affordable on the same site. A high level of ambition there. The second part of the vision is that we will provide land to allow the growth in jobs. We did an economic strategy within the last year, looking at the data, talking to employers. What we found is that business in Monmouthshire is prospering, can prosper. People want to do business in Monmouthshire, but they are constrained for two things. One, the lack of labour, which is why our housing policy is so important, and two, the lack of land. So when you look at the detail of the plan, you'll see that there are proposals to provide throughout the county 48 hectares of employment land. The new homes will be within walking distance of existing settlements. That's been referred to in the introductions, which I'll come back to. But in all the strategic sites, the intention is that from the moment that people can begin living on those sites, they will be able to walk into their town centres. The ambition is there that all the homes, market homes, affordable homes, social housing for rent homes, will be net zero carbon. This will be a first in Wales. We've spent a lot of time talking to developers, talking to others in this field. There are precise definitions of what net zero means and how it will be achieved, and we can debate those. So the whole planning policy framework is designed to protect the environment with the net zero homes, with the walking distances to homes, with the open spaces. If we move on to the second slide, you'll find there that there's a summary of what I've just tried to put to you: the lack of affordable homes, the aging population, the circumstances of high-priced market homes, are the context in which we set out the vision for this plan. If we can move on to the third slide. The context is referred to there. I've referred to this new plan providing land for 2,000 homes in the in the plan period. There is a carryover from the existing plan, and the 2,000 homes are in addition to the approximately 4,000 homes, which a few years ago added up to 4,000, but some of those have now been provided. The land for jobs, as you can see there, will support a job growth of 6,000 homes. And I'm often asked with that figure there, well, where will these jobs come from? Who will create these jobs? In large part, my answer is that existing businesses in Monmouthshire are eager to grow, but they are being constrained by that lack of labour, lack of land, and as we begin to supply, it will be, I think, in very large part, indigenous, homegrown business growth, which will create those 6,000 jobs. But that's not to say that we will not continue to seek investment from outside the county. Move on from that. Again, this is a summary. There'll be 50% affordable homes. There will be net zero carbon. If someone in questioning wants to elaborate on that, I have enjoyed scores of hours working with developers on definitions of that, and I'd be happy to share some of that as a response to questioning. The travel connections, so that you can, as you're aware, most traffic movements are local. All of us, for some of the time, travel in a commuter fashion and we travel longer distances. But the data is that most of our travelling is local and that the potential is there to substitute that travel for walking, cycling, mobility, scooters, whatever. And providing those routes, I believe, can make a real difference. A discussion I had only in the last hour in providing that 50% affordable housing, in seeking to influence the balance of market housing, we will be seeking on all the sites a housing mix. We want to move away from those ghettos where some part of the county exclusively consists of the 5-bedroom executive home, and we want to balance that so that those people are living alongside people with different backgrounds, younger most likely. So a housing mix should be part of that. And we want to give the access to the green open spaces which are around our towns and within our towns. And the point I'm particularly keen on, and it goes back to the zero carbon homes, a lot of work we do with builders, with the Design Commission of Wales, on incentivising, requiring the higher standard of design and build of these homes. Move on from that. The actual allocation of these settlements, we've tried to balance it throughout the county. The strategic sites in particular, Abergavenny, mainly on the Abergavenny east side, beyond the station, but other parts as well, but adding up to 600 homes. Chepstow, the site there, on the High Beach roundabout, 146 homes. The proposal for Monmouth, which I'd like to come back to in a moment because I was interested in and would like to reflect on the contributions we've had, but the site at Leesbrook, Dixon Road, the site there, 270 homes, but in total 330 in the town. Caldecott, 810. Whilst we focus on the strategic sites, it would have been quite easy to say, well, that's it. But we've taken the view that we have a responsibility to I don't like the term secondary settlements, smaller settlements, which are important to this county. And insofar as they need extra homes to maintain their sustainability, maintain their local services, then provision is made in those smaller settlements as well. If we move on. So if we take them site by site, that's the Abergavenny East site. For most people, certainly for me, when I first conducted the site, I could locate it very easily when you told me it was on the other side of the A465 from the station itself. A site there for 500 homes. Opportunities also for employment uses on that site, and that could be balanced with neighbourhood centres. We have a lot of discussion about that. These sites will often sustain a small neighbourhood centre, but we want them also to contribute to the sustainability of their town centres. So we don't want them to attempt to be wholly self-sufficient. We want to get the walking routes into the main town as well. It will incorporate a park and ride facility, and I think that will be very important for neighbouring settlements so that they can access the railway network by parking here. One of the significant design challenges on this site is that we need to traverse the A465 in order to make it work. If we fail to do that, these people would simply drive down to the roundabout to the south. They'd be car-based, and the site would fail. We need the walking routes across the 465. A lot of discussion has taken place with the Trunk Road agent, South East Wales Trunk Road agent, Welsh Government, a lot of discussion with Network Rail. The proposals will include the way in which we can cross the 465, the ways in which we can cross the railway in order to integrate this settlement into the town. So I move on from there. The Caldecott site, east of Caldecott, north of Port Skewett site. It's a mixed-use allocation, 765 homes, 50% affordable, as we've said. Whereas the Abergavenny site, the judgment is that the existing school provision in Abergavenny will be sufficient. This site will require a primary school on its own site as it develops. You look at that site, you can see how it incorporates within itself an important mix of development and green open space. So I'm often told that, oh, you can't develop there, the castle grounds flood. Well, you can see that the castle grounds are the green space to the south of the proposed settlement. The proposed settlement, in the first instance, a brownfield site on the David Broome enterprise, and then going north from there, but maintaining green space within it. There will be within this site a hectare of employment land as well. Can we move on from there? The Monmouth Leesbrook site, the site off Dixton Road. This is the point where I would like to reflect on the important contributions made at the beginning of the meeting. The suggestion that there are no infrastructure proposals related to this site, I draw members' attention to the fact, I know it's buried deep, but there's an important Appendix 8 in this document, which relates the intended infrastructure requirements related to all of these strategic sites, and it does so with reference to this site as well. In terms of infrastructure, I'm often told that insufficient attention is given to infrastructure, or infrastructure is never provided first. The only reason that any development can be proposed for Monmouth is that the infrastructure for water quality guarantees will be in place by 2025. If that infrastructure development through Welsh Water were not available, were not in place, then no development would be possible in Monmouth at all. That infrastructure will be in place by 2025. Talked about water quality there, the handling of sewage, that's relates to the investment by Welsh Water. In terms of flood impact, which was raised, all developments in Wales since I think 2019 are subject to the sustainable drainage requirements of the Welsh Government, which means that every site has to accommodate the impact on drainage within its own site. So all potential runoff from such a site has to be held within the site itself. The runoff, to use that phrase, cannot be allowed to spread beyond the site itself. So on that basis, on the basis that will and must be achieved, then the site will not increase the flow of water off the site, will not increase flood consequences beyond the site. Craig, have I got that right? Okay, yeah. Okay, there's always a danger when a politician makes a technical claim such as that. The suggestion that the local housing providers will not be able to provide for the 50% affordable housing on this site or any other site, all the land developers, before they're included, before these sites have been included, have had to submit an assessment of how they meet the 50% affordable housing. Those assessments have been submitted, they have been appraised, and the conclusion of the independent appraisal is that on each site, the 50% affordable housing is viable, will be achieved, and that we can insist upon it. The suggestion was made that this site was too far from the centre, 2,000 metres was referred to. It vary obviously from one part of the site to the other. Was it the most scientific assessment? Other scientific assessments have taken place, but I walked personally from this site and all the options in Monmouth in my individual appraisal when the choices were being tested, and my walking time from the access point of this site into town was, I think, 11 minutes to the centre of the town. I found it potentially integral to the town and one of its attractive features. The suggestion was made that the site out at Wanstow would be a preferable site. I was interested in that suggestion, again, personally visited the site, again, personally walked the site. It has now, which didn't have at the time of my walk, the new active travel route to it. It was a longer walk. It did feel more detached from the town than this site. Having said that, if we're allowed to go to public consultation, and if the feedback from the people of Monmouth was that the Wanstow site was clearly preferable to this site, then that would be a conclusion of the public consultation, which we would seek to accommodate. The purpose of the consultation is to learn, and if we learnt that from the wider public of Monmouthshire, we would respond to that information. The point was raised about air quality. The information we've got from our own environmental health team is that the air quality issues at the point of access to this site are within acceptable levels. But I listened closely to the submission that was made. I will want to report that submission back to our own environmental health team, and I would like their conclusions to be compared with those conclusions and for all of us to learn from that exercise. So I want to make clear, and that's why I've dwelt on this slide, that we are listening to all comments I've made. We have been to take us this far, and if allowed to go to public consultation, that listening process would continue over the next period of months. If I can move on from that. The Chepstow site, 100 metres or so from where I live. I'm a Chepstow councillor. This site was chosen because, again, it felt more integral to the existing town than alternatives. One can walk to Pembroke School. My walking time, about 7 or 8 minutes there, takes me to the shopping parade in Bulwark at the same time. Walking times, a more higher gradient, would take you into the town centre itself. It has its attractions. The views from there are extraordinary, and I think master planning should reflect the potential of that. It has its challenges, which all of us living in the area, and Councillor Brown reminds me of on a regular basis. The challenges include the congestion on High Beach roundabout. That is subject to a study. Again, in terms of infrastructure, there's reference to it. The potential for this site, the actual development on this site, will not be allowed until we can get the safe walking routes beyond this site through the High Beach roundabout. Move on from there. The employment allocations, you can see there, 48 hectares. I don't know if you're the same as me, something to do with my background. I convert a hectare into 2 large football pitches, so we're talking about 100 football pitches of employment land there, provided by this plan, in addition to 9 hectares coming forward from the previous plan. And we move from there. You'll see those allocated, deliberately allocated across the county. And that actually, at all times, we're looking for an avoidance of over-concentration, either in employment land or residential land. We want the whole county to develop in a balanced way. So I wasn't impressed with the suggestion, well, if there are difficulties developing in Monmouth, then why not add it to Abergavenny? Because that's the sort of unbalanced development, either in residential or employment land. If we can move on from that. Other aspects which the plan refers to, and I'll only refer to very briefly today, we do seek to have policies that support tourism. Wherever a developer seeks to develop a tourism opportunity, that will be assessed on its planning criteria. We've not allocated land specifically for it, and that doesn't mean that we don't give it a priority. We simply want to be very flexible and allow applications to come forward and be appraised. We've made provision for green wedges in various parts of the county, and those are alongside provision for amenity land. We want to ensure that existing settlements can enjoy the proximity of open spaces, and that's been provided for in those provisions. We want development to support existing town centres. There's a debate throughout the United Kingdom. You'll hear it most often in England at the moment. New towns, new towns. Okay, they've probably got their place. I think existing towns are very attractive places, but they need always to be made more vital, more vibrant, and the balanced development in this plan, I think, will support the vibrancy of our existing towns. Renewable energy, all the homes, the 2,000 homes, will produce through PV panels at least as much electricity as they use, consequential on the house itself. So their heating, their water, their lighting, energy demands will all be met by PV panels on those homes. In addition, we have again a permissive policy for generation of energy, particularly through PV. Where sites become available, where there are applications, they will be considered on their own merits. Green infrastructure we've referred to, and the water environments, the protection in particular of our rivers, feature in the plan as they should. The next steps, this is an important step today. We'll receive the comments of this committee. We received the comments of contributors at the beginning. We'll report those back to full council on the 24th. Full council will be asked to allow us to take these proposals to public consultation. Should it do that, that consultation will take place between the 4th of November and the 16th of December. A lot of planning been putting in place, a lot of preparations in place to make that as engaging as we possibly can in each and every community in the county. By July 25, having considered the public consultation responses and responded to them in a way that I've described, Council is then asked to consider submitting the draft proposals, the deposit plan, to the Welsh Government for inspection. That inspection, that examination will take us, or may take place in the autumn of 25, and as we respond to that, we look to adopt a plan in May 26. We started this process 26 years ago, and it's going to take another few years to reach a conclusion to it. I'll move on from there. The point I would make is that I'm fascinated, others will be, in the responses of the committee today, reporting those to council. The question before us all is whether we've got a basis on which to go to public consultation after the 24th of October. In getting this far, I'll make this point now, we've been extraordinarily reliant on the input of a very small team of officers. My suspicion, I've not been able to test it, probably the smallest team in Wales. But I think a high quality team who have worked for the best part of a decade to take us this far. These proposals have been in the public domain for a week. I'm already getting responses from outside the county, from those who watch this planning process, that they regard this plan amongst the best written plan, the best presented plan that they've seen in Wales. And that is a credit to the team. They are a hugely valuable asset, and in the way in which we respond to these proposals before us, I hope we can continue to value that team. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Craig, do you have anything you wish to?
No, thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Griffiths has presented the case, outlined the document.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'm mindful. Oh, sorry.
Can I get my question now, as I'm about to dock, so it would be easier if I talk now? Is that possible? Sorry to be a nuisance.
No, I'm happy to. So,
Sorry.
no, it's okay. Right, so we'll go to questions for another 10 minutes or so, or speeches, whatever you want to say it is, remarks, I should say. And I believe Lisa would like to go first. Is that all right, Emma? Do you mind?
Yeah, I presume she was going first.
Anyway, okay. So, Lisa, Councillor Dimmock, if you'd like to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, Councillor Dimmock, just to be aware, it's 5 minutes, okay, please?
Okay, I'll be as quick as I can. I just want to thank residents and businesses who have taken the time to email out of the colleagues on place scrutiny. And I'd also like to show my appreciation to those who've attended the meeting today and the level of detail they've gone into. And obviously they've got just as much concern as the rest of us. Okay, how will the council account for significant infrastructure gaps in the areas marked for housing growth, especially in terms of transport, healthcare and education? Given the RLDP
Councillor Dimmock, so we're having trouble hearing you. I don't know if anybody else can understand it at all. Perhaps could you write it so we can see it? Is that possible?
Yeah, it's not coming across, Chair, it's not coming across clearly at all.
No, I couldn't agree more.
If you're online, then there should be a decent connection because, you know, this is an important scrutiny meeting and at the moment I can't make out what Councillor Dimmock is actually saying.
One moment, please. Yeah, Councillor Dimmock, if you'd like to write it in the chat and then I can read it on your behalf. Is that okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Fine.
Okay, whilst we're waiting for Councillor Dimmock to do that, I suggest we go on to Councillor Bryn.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll keep my comments to candidate site CSO 270, if I may, because that is the site that I'm most. Am I on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Is it okay? A little closer, is that better? Okay, thanks. I'll stick my, I'll keep my comments to site CSO 270, if I may, as that's the site that I'm most familiar with. And I'm sure I'm not alone to have an inbox full of concerns regarding this development. One of the issues for me being that we are not yet certain on the impact of the influx of residents from the rollover sites from the previous LDP of 280 homes, which is potentially, I guess, 400 to 500 extra vehicles on the roads, in addition to the vehicles from these 270 homes on site CSO 270. I do recognise that affordable housing is needed and half of these homes are targeted to fulfil this criteria. But does the 5.8 hectare candidate employment site, in addition to the numbers of workers currently having to travel into Monmouth because they can't afford to live here, is that enough to potentially fill these additional homes in order that Monmouth's new residents fulfil the criteria of living sustainable lifestyles? I understand that we currently have double the national average of commuters who walk to work in Monmouthshire, but I am conscious that a significant number of employment opportunities would need to be added to the town in order for the residents of these 550 additional homes not to end up further exacerbating the road congestion and consequential emission issues we already see on the A40 and the A4136 by jumping into vehicles and driving to employment elsewhere. Our developments are, after all, meant to be directed to the county's most sustainable settlements. 19.3.1 states that development proposals that would generate unacceptable additional traffic growth or adversely affect the safe and efficient operation of the highway system will not be permitted. I'm not sure how Monmouth qualifies as a sustainable development, considering our severe lack of public transport links. Why is the local transport strategy not bundled in with the RLDP documents? And am I right in understanding that the transport assessments are not conducted until the planning stage? Also, if this development was to go ahead, what processes can we as an authority put in place to mitigate the potential harms caused by the post-development loss of green spaces, which could theoretically increase runoff and intensify flooding when private gardens are paved over? Moreover, my last point, I recognise that the dark skies policy will go some way perhaps to mitigate the harms caused to the greater horseshoe bats which roost less than a kilometre from this site. But will this be enough, considering the urbanisation of this site will see a loss of what appears to be a significant chunk of their feeding locations? Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, any more hands? Sorry. Any answers, please?
Do you want me to come back, Chair, to answer some of Councillor Bryn's queries? Thank you for the comments, Councillor Bryn. In terms of Monmouth, I think when we're talking about sites, I think obviously as part of the previous preferred strategies, we did get a community engagement on the three growth areas, which one was Dixton Road, which is the one which is now within the deposit plan, one was the Vauxhall Fields, and the other one was the development at Wanstead Road at Kingswood. And when we look at these sites which are being promoted for development, the planning policy team have reviewed them, sequentially tested them and come to the decision that on balance, Dixton Road site is the one that is considered to be the most appropriate and considered to be the most sustainable in terms of connections to the town centre, in terms of the impact on the agricultural land classification, and also in terms of impact on existing infrastructure. Monmouth is an area which I think previously we weren't looking to allocate on because of the water quality, because of the phosphate issue. As Councillor Griffiths has explained, we are going to have a strategic phosphate solution for Monmouth in terms of stripping at the treatment works. That has been £100 million worth of investment from Welsh Water across Wales, and Monmouth and Llanffoes treatment works are the key strategic sites in Monmouthshire. That does enable us to allow development to occur in a sustainable fashion in Monmouth. In 2022, in the previous version of the strategy, we didn't allocate any development in Monmouth. We did decide not to. Welsh Government did write back to us and say that to keep our community sustainable and to ensure that we do have that balanced demographic, that we should be allocating a site in Monmouth. So I think at that higher level, at a national scale, not allocating any land for development in Monmouth is going to harm it in the long run. And all of those things that we were talking about and Councillor Griffiths discussed in terms of house prices, in terms of the affordable housing waiting list, in terms of the balance of demographic, none of that will be addressed in Monmouth if we don't allocate housing and employment opportunities to that town. I think not to allocate anything would do the town a disservice ultimately. But there is a decision to make. There is a choice ultimately in terms of the sites, and that's what we're hoping to engage with communities on as part of the consultation. And we will go through that process. There is 4.5 hectares of employment land being allocated at the Wanstead Road site, so that is providing that sustainable income as well, so economy as well, so that should create jobs within the area to balance off the housing. In terms of the transport implications, we have had a county-wide strategic transport impact assessment done, and which has looked at how the transport will move with the new developments, and that has been modelled and looked at. As well as that, transport assessments will be submitted for each individual site and will be considered as part of that planning application process. I do take the point that some of the sites in the existing plan haven't come forward, and I think that's a real shame ultimately for Monmouth, because they haven't had that housing. There is a lack of housing over the number of years, and that's because of the environmental constraint that phosphates delivered over the last few years. It has resulted in a stalling of development coming forward, but that is coming forward now, and this site will ensure that we do have that broader amount of affordable housing to offer our residents and our citizens of Monmouthshire ultimately, and the people in housing need. In terms of the sustainable drainage, yes, this site will certainly be developed in accordance with the new standards. So developments that were part of the old plan didn't have a sustainable urban drainage system. Every single development in this deposit plan will have a sustainable drainage system and will manage water on site, and it will have the same runoff rate as greenfield rate. So it will not result in additional surface runoff or flooding ultimately. And the issue with the Dixton Road site in terms of that ecology value and that impact with regard to the Greater Horseshoe, that has been fully considered as part of the development of that site. You would have noticed from a previous iteration of the preferred strategy, the allocation was a lot larger. It's been significantly reduced to ensure that there isn't any harm on the bat population, and that there is a defined green corridor built in on that eastern side to ensure the protection of the bats, and also to create a natural buffer to the town of Monmouth, which at the moment has a bit of a hard landscape when approaching it. So that green corridor will enhance the bat population to all effect. And that is written into Planning Policy Wales and into this deposit plan as well, that any development proposal needs to enhance the natural habitat for bats, for dormice, for any type of ecology. The application needs to evidence all of that. So we're working with developers to ensure that I'm meeting all of those criteria. It is a high bar to develop within this plan, and to some of the policies which in there, which Councillor Griffiths has referred to, some of these policies are the first in Wales, and we are pushing the boundaries in terms of ensuring that we meet all of our requirements in terms of creating sustainable settlements, creating a vibrant economy, ensuring that developments don't promote sustainable forms of transport, and ensuring that we protect that environment and particularly our ecology as well. So the policy framework within that will seek to do all of those things.
Thank you. Councillor Griffiths wishes to come back, I believe.
Just to add a few points to what response to Councillor Bryn. That Appendix 8 I referred to does pick up on the important point of transport infrastructure. And what that appendix specifies for this site is a developer of this site would be required to provide, I think, £680,000 in support of the local bus network. So that's a recognition that the developer bears some of the cost of this, and that this is a priority for infrastructure development. Councillor Bryn also made an important challenge, if that's the right word, in how we're getting the balance right between employment land and residential land. I think we are. 300 additional homes, 5.8 hectares of employment land. It makes me think back to numerous conversations I've had with businesses in and around Monmouth town. So many saying that they could expand if only land was available. But also confirming, or I think local members have also told me, that so often relying on in-commuting for the labour force that they already have. And insofar as we could provide that affordable housing, then we have less of a commuter flow for those existing businesses in the town. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bryn, is that, do you want to come back on any of that?
Yeah, there was only the one question. It was about, I understand that there is SEDS criteria for all new builds. My concern was the post-development urbanisation, so the paving of gardens when the bottom of this plot already floods. And I know currently there's only an allowance of 10% on top, whereas in more modern days, people often pave both fronts and backs. In fact, often you see an entire plot paved over. And is there anything that we can do to mitigate the potential harms from that?
Chair, okay.
Oh, sorry. Yes, please.
Yes, Councillor Bryn, that's a valid point in terms of hard standing over recreational amenity space when the properties are occupied. That is something which could potentially within the gift of the planning committee when they come to make that planning decision. You could reduce the permitted development rights further if there was considered to be evidence that it would result in additional service runoff. The application will have to submit a flood consequence assessment when it gets to that stage, having that full detail. But that is something that we can look at ultimately if members were concerned when the application comes in at that stage, and we're talking years down the line in terms of what Councillor Griffiths was saying in terms of timelines. But ultimately, yes, we could look at the level of hard standing each property would have and whether there should be a restriction on you could only hard stand 50% of your garden, for instance, or something like that. That's something that we can certainly review as part of the process.
Thank you. Councillor Bryn, you happy with all that? That's great, thank you. Okay, now we move on to the next person, is Councillor Thomas Davis.
Good afternoon, Chair. Thank you so much for the opportunity to contribute to this Police Scrutiny Committee's deliberations this afternoon. May I too join Councillor Dimmock in thanking the Cabinet Member and indeed acknowledging the Herculean efforts of officers in pulling the papers together for this important scrutiny meeting. Can I focus initially on the proposed Abergavenny East development? And I refer members to paragraph, 14.3.3 in Annex 1, which acknowledges that the western end of the site, of the proposed site, plays an important role in integrating the new neighbourhood with the railway station and indeed wider Abergavenny. However, it's my understanding that the western end of the site comprises land that's being promoted by both the Colebrook estate, and I refer members to site plan CS0293, in addition to land proposed by Monmouthshire Housing Association, which is referenced as CS0213. Can the Cabinet member and the officers confirm that the landowner of CS0293 has not agreed to this master plan? And can officers also confirm that the land this land within Monmouth Housing Association's control is not in fact within its control, as indicated in the blue markup of the master plan? I think it's page 119 of Appendix 1. Now, this land is designated for the neighbourhood of the community hub, which lies at the very heart of this proposed development, a centre that will serve both as the urban extension of the railway station, the home of the proposed park and ride facility, and which will fulfil an important linkage to and from the allocation of the station, from the housing to the station. So if that land is not within the control of MHA, does the Cabinet member understand why some of us are somewhat concerned at the ability to deliver the proposed master plan that's been presented to this committee today? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Who would like to go first on that one? Great.
Thank you, Councillor Davis, for the question. And it is a really valid point, ultimately, in terms of land ownership when people are promoting their sites for development proposals. And this site is being promoted by two different developers, so Monmouthshire Housing Estate and Colebrook Estates, as you've referred to. There is, in terms of agreement on a master plan, these are council master plans. So all the master plans within the LDP and deposit plan are developed based on the planning policy framework that the council wants to input and impose on development proposals. And we certainly want to work with people and developers in terms of bringing the sites forward in that collaboration space with our partners. However, these are working with Design Commission for Wales as well, in terms of ensuring that the development proposals incorporate the correct green infrastructure, are the best in terms of placemaking opportunities, and ensuring that the council it seeks the best form of development possible, ultimately, for all of the strategic sites and all of the other sites within the deposit plan. So the piece of land that you're referring to in terms of the Colebrook Estate aspect, they have not agreed, the same way that MHA have not agreed fully to the master plan. That is a planning policy framework the council wishes to impose. But what I would say is that both landowners have put their sites forward for consideration for development within the deposit plan. So both have put them forward. We feel that it is a strategic site. In terms of the placemaking opportunities, it would be appropriate to allocate a park and ride next to the train station to alleviate some of the concerns already appreciated on the A465. There's opportunities there for development in terms of commercial development, potentially, hotel, employment opportunities, and it seems right from a placemaking perspective that we have that development proposal with there. There are also other gifts within the council's assets in terms of bringing that site forward. However, in terms of delivering the housing, which is the part of the development in terms of the affordable housing, active travel routes, public rights of way all exist already over that land. So there certainly needs to be work still done between all partners, but in terms of a strategic proposal, this site is very exciting from a planning point of view. Directly next to a train station, significant opportunities like I've outlined. I think in terms of having those conversations and detailed conversations with all landowners to make it work and to make it happen will come the further progression we have with the site. But all landowners are certainly engaged in terms of promoting their site for development.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Griffiths, do you have anything?
Very little to add. We regard both parts of the site as of strategic importance. We're including them as both of them as an integral part of the strategic site. Our intention is to proceed through negotiation and collaboration with the landowners. That is our objective.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davis, would you like to come back on any of that?
I'd like to press the camera on that very last point about the ambition remains to proceed with a negotiation, but officers also talked about other gifts being within the council's powers to advance this site. I mean, are we potentially talking about compulsory purchase orders, and not exclusively in the context of this development, but as a broad matter of policy principle? Is that a nuclear option that this authority is prepared to contemplate to advance some of these strategic sites?
The councillor would not expect me to continue these negotiations in this setting. There are a range of opportunities available to the council. Negotiation is the first priority. Thank you.
I wasn't inviting the cameraman necessarily to divulge commercially sensitive negotiations, merely to invite him to comment on perhaps a more political or ideological question about this Labour-run authority's approach to advancing certain key strategic developments. But I will note the response, and perhaps he and I can discuss in future.
Our approach will be entirely pragmatic and effective. Thank you.
That is reassuring, Councillor.
Councillor Thomas, please put your mic to mute if you find things amusing. Thank you. So we move on to the next person. It's Councillor Tudor Thomas, please.
Right, thanks, Chair. Diolch yn fawr. A diolch am yr adroddiad hynny. Thanks for the plan. It's obviously a huge piece of work, and I was actually on the council when we were looking at things like this in the past. In my opinion, there has to be a balance in terms of housing and employment land right across Monmouthshire County Council. And I think it's quite difficult. I appreciate the inputs from people today from Monmouth, but I think it's quite difficult to actually stand back and try to be more objective rather than sort of subjective and let personal interests of of where we live or for me as a county councillor of where I represent. We've got to accept the fact we are an ageing population. If you look at the demography of the county, and we've got to do something, to mitigate that. And it's perfectly okay for people sitting in this meeting today and perhaps sitting at their homes across the county who are older, like me, who own their own homes, like lots of people in this chamber and on the meeting today. It's not so good for younger people who are perhaps on lower incomes, and generally when you're younger and you're starting your career, you're not on the highest level of income. It's much tougher for them in an authority like Monmouthshire, which is very popular with people, and lots of people retiring who've sold houses elsewhere at a much higher price and can afford to come and live in Monmouthshire. So I think we've got to stand back from the local personal interests. I'm very unhappy with the concept of, if people don't like the idea of so many houses in one town, of saying, well, let's shunt them to another. I don't think that would be good for the, as it were, the receiving town, and it wouldn't be good for the county overall. And it's unfortunate, really, that Monmouth, the town, does not have really good travel links. It doesn't have a train station, which is obviously a huge boon for people living in Abergavenny. And certainly if we went to that idea of shunting houses to Abergavenny, it would mean people would be travelling from Abergavenny, probably perhaps to work in Monmouth, and that would increase pollution. And I certainly don't want to see increased pollution. I think we need now to go to the public consultation, because we can discuss this, forevermore. And in reality, what I want to hear is what people think across the authority. rather than people who are councillors or people who've got particular interests. So I think we need to get to a point now to go across to that. I would express a little bit of concern about the development in Abergavenny on a sort of a council sort of viewpoint, that we must make sure if that goes ahead, and I'm sure lots of people want it to go ahead, that we make sure that that is integrated in terms of travel, that there are good links across the A465, because that is a very fast road. And for people like me who've lived in Abergavenny for a long time, it's not something that you would want to cross readily unless you're fairly quick on your feet and you've got a good pair of trainers. It is a major barrier, and we really need to think about that. And we also need to think about the infrastructure on such a very large part, a very large development, and that is crucially important. But I do think now we need to get to this public consultation. The time for discussion and sort of smoke-filled rooms, for people who remember Harold Wilson, I think they've gone. We need to put it out there now so people can come back, and then perhaps we might have to change and have to mitigate certain conditions of the RDLP. Thanks.
Okay, so did you actually have any real questions there, Councillor Tudor-Thomas?
The one question I had was really about the connections, ensuring that there are good connections for that big development on the eastern side of Abergavenny, to ensure that that is really part of the plan and to develop a good infrastructure if that development goes ahead.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Griffiths wants to reply, or was it Craig?
Craig may want to follow up, but the discussions we've had with both the developer, the design commission, and crucially with the trunk road agent, and you'll find it in the papers before you, indicate that we will be putting, I think, 3 crossing places across the 465. They will be controlled by lights. They will transform both the pedestrian experience and the driver experience. The drivers will recognise as they approach this that they are entering a residential urban development, and that they will respond in their driving behaviour as a result of that. The lights will ensure that they do so. The effect of those changed behaviours by drivers, the effect of the infrastructure, will, I believe, mean that the new residents on the site will feel perfectly comfortable crossing that road, moving on to cross the railway. And again, the current master planning is 2 crossing points of the railway line to the station and 1 further north into town. So there's fairly advanced master planning in place, and the discussions with developers, trunk road agent and Network Rail are continuing.
Okay, thank you. Craig, do you have anything to add?
I don't think I have significant more to add than what Councillor Griffiths has said there ultimately, but I mean, it is, I suppose, evident in this conversation ultimately in terms of that detail. I think for all members, as part of looking at the replacement local development plan, I know communities and members want to see the detail in terms of exactly what's going to happen in terms of the development proposal. And I think we need to remember this is the strategic high-level document here at this stage. It's not a planning application. It is that allocating of land ultimately for development proposals. There's going to be a significant amount of consultation as part of the replacement local development plan. There will also be significant consultation on a detailed planning application at a later stage if the site gets allocated for development. When we're referring to Abergavenny East, the connectivity with Abergavenny Town is a key consideration and what will make the developments acceptable and exemplar ultimately in terms of sustainable transport links into the train station. As Councillor Griffiths has said, we're working with the Design Commission for Wales to ensure that the master planning is correct and the connections, active travel links to the train station and to the town centre are appropriate and fit for purpose, and ensure that people don't use the car and are able to use foot and cycling into that town. So that is key ultimately in terms of what we do with the A465, how we get over the railway link, those 2 points which are significant in terms of that wider master planning process, and that there is there's still a lot of detailed work to be done on that. Councillor Griffiths has referred to some linkages points to what we're looking at. There's still a lot of work to be done to sort of working those schemes up, and that might be at a later stage if the site is allocated. But Welsh Government, Sutra, with Grail, they're all being consulted on the proposals, they're all engaged, and they're working with us in collaboration to address these issues, ultimately ensure those connections are key to the success of the development proposal.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tudor Thomas, do you have anything you wish to come back on that, please?
No, I'm quite happy with that. Thanks very much. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Lisa Dimmock, please.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Given the RLDP's ambitious housing growth targets in such areas such as Monmouth, Caldecott, Chepstow, it appears that supporting infrastructure development is insufficiently detailed, as we've heard of other colleagues. As a Sevenside area resident, I cannot walk to do my food shopping, go to the gym, doctors, dentists, without getting in my car and travelling. It's a lovely idea, the thought of walking and cycling, but it's completely impractical for working couples and young busy families that you want to attract to Monmouthshire. I appreciate Craig's comments about this being a high-level document, but to encourage elected members and residents, we need to see some detail on how you're going to deliver this. Without clear commitments and timelines for improving roads, public transport throughout Caldecott and Portskewer, and healthcare facilities, how can the plan ensure that these communities will not face even more severe strain on services? The preferred strategy reported in December 2022 was supposed to be evidenced by a high-level assessment which would have been detailed in time for the deposit RLDP. The omission of an in-depth viability statement, especially for the major sites, raises concern for me, as I'm sure it would other members here today, considering the scale of these sizes and how they would bear the cost of 50% affordable housing and the requirements for net zero carbon ready homes, and of course the infrastructure costs. I can't see how we can endorse a report without such an important document and these large gaps that need to be addressed. There is a disproportionate focus on housing development in the village of Portskewer. You call it Caldecott East. I cannot stress enough, it falls within the Portskewer board. And this raises several concerns currently. Caldecott and Portskewer have have access to poor amenities, such as schools, healthcare facilities, including dentists and doctors, public transport and recreation options. As I'm sure Councillor Strong can advocate on behalf of Caldecott residents, with the proposed housing increase, I'm deeply concerned about how the poor local infrastructure will support the influx of new residents. Can you clarify what plans are in place to address the lack of amenities in the area before the construction of these proposals? Given the RLDP's focus on creating sustainable and resilient communities, it's unclear again how the infrastructure in Caldecott East Portskewer will accommodate the additional housing without significant investment. I'd like to understand why this ward is being earmarked for such a significant share of the county council's RLDP and housing needs. Other wards seem to have a more balanced mix of development with existing amenities. Housing is required throughout the county, but your plan does not reflect this. What is the real rationale behind concentrating this development in the area which already has limited resource? The RLDP emphasises the need for housing, but the strategy for the economic development and employment opportunity seems underdeveloped at this time. Given the plan's heavy reliance on housing growth, there are equally robust commitments to create local employment opportunities. How does the council plan to avoid the risk of Monmouthshire becoming more of a commuter zone than it already is? I'm sorry, but people are chasing those larger salaries. You will always have people who want to better their lives for them and their families. They are going to go outside of Chepstow, Caldecott, Monmouth to go for those larger salaries elsewhere. How are you going to ensure that the job opportunities that will become available in Monmouthshire are going to offer those salaries that people want? I also want some clarity on the land grade for the employment land that is suggested in the report in Caldecott, north of the Crick site. And I do want to just sort of question what Craig said about farmers being engaged throughout the whole process, because I've been contacted by one farmer who's had no idea where we are in this process. And I just want some more clarity that they are being kept up to date. I'll stop there, Chair, and I'll let Councillor Griffiths and Craig come back in. But I really appreciate the level of depth that Councillor Griffiths went into at the beginning, and Craig and his team for the reports.
Okay, if you need to ask further questions, you may afterwards. Councillor Griffiths, do you want to?
Yeah, perhaps if I lead off and then Craig can follow. The issues of infrastructure are important on all these sites, and that includes the land north of Portskewitt, east of Caldecott. Progress is being made already and confirms my intention that this site should be clearly linked by walking, cycling, pramming, scooting routes into Portskewitt, into Caldecott. Councillor Dimmock is well aware and has appreciated the investment which preceded my time into the so-called Greenway active travel route. That is a beginning of implementing a vision across the region. That Greenway will continue north, and as it continues north, it will be linked onto the new development site. From that Greenway, there will be routes through the castle ground, to the schools, to the facilities of Caldecott town, and indeed Portskewitt as well. I regard those active travel plans as exciting and crucial to the success of this development. Important references are made to the stress which is on our current community health services. I in no way want to diminish those and want to continue to work with the Health Board to manage and respond to those pressures. The RLDP in itself cannot solve those pressures, but we do need to take care, and we will take care, that we do not add to them. And we are in close communication with primary healthcare providers in the area who are responding positively and are looking for the opportunities to expand and diversify their provision in response to these sites. Have we over-concentrated on the land north of Portskewitt, east of Caldecott? 700 homes compared to 500, 300, 150 elsewhere. This is where the housing demand is, but we haven't just followed the demand. We're seeking balanced development across the county. What's proposed in this area is only a fraction of what was proposed in 2020 by the council. So it's been trimmed, more than trimmed. It's been reconsidered and rebalanced in quite a substantial way. I don't know, Craig, do you want to add to that?
Thank you, Councillor Dimmock. Yeah, I mean, in terms of the concentration in Caldecott, I mean, I think we need to see that as part of that cluster of settlements as we do in the Seven-Side region. So Megarindy, Roggett, Subbrook, Portskewett, Caldecott. Caldecott town does have that sort of gravitas in terms of a town centre, in terms of amenities, is considered to be most sustainable out of those settlements with the train station, and the linkages ultimately and connections wider to the hinterland around it. So I think as Caldecott as a town, it has that gravitas and that centre point in terms of that focal. So allowing the growth and the development to be allocated within that area makes it more sustainable in that particular instance. Obviously, massive opportunities here with regards to placemaking as well. So growth and the development in that area will help the town centre potentially. It will also ensure good active travel links through Caldecott Castle and that green space, which is so valued by the community, as I know. A resident of this proposed development would be able to access all of that as well. So in terms of the concentration of development in that area, Caldecott is considered to be a sustainable place and an appropriate place to put that development in that area and have that gravitas and the ability to ensure a new primary school is created as well, rather than separating out development. We talk about infrastructure. This development at Caldecott East North Portskewett would ensure that we have that primary school within that development and also reducing travel around the county when parents are dropping off children. In terms of engaging in landowners and the promotion of sites, Councillor Dimmock, yes, what was referring to there is the actual landowner. So I'm talking as local planning authority here rather than a council worker. So the council as landowner is promoted and engaged in terms of bringing the site forward. I will certainly speak to colleagues regarding particular farm holders and any farmers who are leasing land to make sure they are fully notified, and that would be the council's responsibility. In terms of job opportunities, I think, again, we have to go back in terms of the armoury the council has, ensuring the economy in Monmouthshire is thriving. The replacement local development plan is a land allocation document. It'll allocate the land for development. We also have an economic skills strategy which promotes the economy and ensuring that we attract businesses and development in the area. So we have to work, when we have the land allocated for development, we can say to businesses, we got this land, please come and use it. We're open for business. We want to create the jobs, and we want to create those high-value jobs that you're referring to as well. We want to create a mix of job opportunities, so able to have jobs within factories and within in those settings, those use classes, but also in the high setting as well. And that's what the economic strategy is trying to do. And this, I think, we just need to keep remembering. This is a land allocation document. It allocates the land. The council has other methods and strategies and links with the Cardiff Capital Region to ensure that we attract the right businesses to create jobs in our region. This is the first stage, is allocating the land for that development. There was also a reference in terms of active travel links, and I do appreciate that some settlements at the moment, they don't have those active travel links, and they don't have those connections. What we're trying to do here is ensure that active travel is front and foremost from the moment we start planning the development, from the moment we start having that conversation, is built in, so you create that environment where people will automatically be able to walk, cycle, and not go into the private motor vehicle. It's changing that culture and changing the way that we move, and hopefully by doing it from the very, very early stages of preliminary stages of the development proposal, that will encourage that moving forward. There is still, obviously, as we are aware, a lot of work to do on existing settlements as well.
Okay,
Craig.
Lisa.
Just on the active travel route, obviously I'm fully aware of how that's been embraced by the community. I was the cabinet member who delivered that in the previous administration, but it is used for recreational use. I'm not seeing anyone use it as a commuter route, and I don't believe you will. Talking to parents at ARW and those that are having to go into Caldecott Primary School at the moment, they're not going to walk to school. Parents will get in their car. If you think about a young family and their work schedule, people have jobs to then go on to. You know, there needs to be some common sense applied to this, you know, and I don't want to sound like I'm being overly critical here. And I understand what Craig's trying to say with Caldecott being a well-established town, and it's, you know, in the Sevenside area, but that land is going to be divided by the castle grounds. That's flood regular. You're saying that the land that you are proposing doesn't flood. Okay, I will accept that, but it will be divided from that settlement because of flooding throughout the winter months. So it is going to form part of the community heavily with Port Stewart. It won't naturally form an extension of Caldecott. Yeah, okay. I will send you the farmer's details who's been asking for updates as well, Craig. Thank you ever so much, both.
Thank you, Councillor Dillard. That'd be great if you could send those over. We'll get in contact.
Okay, unless Councillor Griffiths has anything to say to that, I think a little break would be really good right here. A few faces telling me that. So if we could break for 10 minutes, is that sufficient? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so are we all here? Wonderful, thank you. All right, so without further ado, let's move on to the next person, which is Councillor Louise Brown, please.
Thank you, Chair. I did actually want to comment about two sites, so I'll just start with the Mountain Road site in Chepstow first of all, and then I'd like to have the opportunity to say something about the Shire Newton site as well.
Absolutely, not a problem.
Okay, so first of all, if I look at the Mountain Road site, the concern about sites in Chepstow, both for the previous Bayfield site and the Mountain Road site, is the traffic congestion at High Beach roundabout. You've mentioned about a county-wide transport assessment, but I can't find any documents that refer to a county-wide transport assessment. And also, when the tolls went, both Highways England and Highways Wales did studies showing that the High Beach roundabout would be beyond capacity, and that hasn't been taken into account in relation to site development in Chepstow. You've probably recently received a email from Barrett David Wilson comparing the two sites and their ratings of them. And I won't go into detail on that, but obviously my concern is that the Mountain Road site is very close to the roundabout itself. Now, although you've actually allowed some land for improvements in High Beach roundabout, what you haven't done, and why I feel that the road infrastructure in this plan is inadequate, is because if you look at the previous adopted local plan, for example at 16.1c, and also Table 6, for the Fairfield Maybe site, they specifically said that there should be High Beach roundabout improvements. Now, I understand that the Fairfield Maybe site, the Welsh Government were consulted on it, and they didn't actually make the improvements to High Beach roundabout, but it still should be, the site, any of the sites in Chepstow should be contingent on High Beach roundabout improvements. Because of the fact that obviously in previous plans you have actually put site-specific requirements in relation to road infrastructure, and this is what is missing from this. It may be argued, oh, we've got a well-tag whatever study coming along, but that didn't stop you way back when for the Fairfield Maybe site actually making a road infrastructure specific requirement, and I think that that's what's needed in relation to this site and in relation to other sites. Obviously in the wider area for Chepstow, we're talking about the Chepstow Relief Road, which previously this Place Committee said they thought that the Forest of Dean had to have that within their plan, otherwise the MCC couldn't support it. Well, we haven't got anything like that in here. We haven't got the details about the Chepstow Relief Road, the High Beach roundabout, the M48 link in Caldecott and Roggett area. And my concern is not just with this Mountain Road development that's so close to the roundabout that looking at the plans, the traffic will have difficulty coming in and out, and they'll block traffic going off and coming in. And obviously traffic flows are important, and that point was made in 16.1c of the old adopted plan for the Fairfield Maybe site. And I think these sites should be contingent on these improvements, because basically there's not only going to be extra traffic from the High Beach, from the Mountain Road site or any site in Chepstow, there's also going to be extra traffic congestion on the A48 A48 Pormeric, coming from Caldecott to join the motorway from these 700 or 800 houses that you're proposing there. Now, I appreciate that you've put active travel measures in different places, but I don't think it's realistic to not expect that those 700 or 800 houses will have at least one or maybe two cars each. So you're actually going to increase the traffic, and quite often traffic basically is queued to the bottom of Pormeric Hill, and it's also queued to the bottom of St Lawrence's Road. And I don't think that the plan is adequate in terms of road infrastructure. I actually, there's a magnifying glass that you can put on this report, and I actually put road infrastructure in to find out what was commented on that. There were 19 references to road infrastructure and only one in the main body of the report. Most of those were in the consultation responses. And in terms of traffic congestion, there were 17 traffic congestion comments, and there was only 2 in the main body of the report. We're talking about 2,000 pages approximately here, and the conclusion will be reached that no notice or very little notice have been taken of the local responses to this particular issue. So in my opinion, the this RLDP is inadequate because it doesn't cover those points, and it doesn't make developments have site-specific requirements or policies within them to cover that particular point. And I want to make a similar point with regard to Shy Newton, but not in relation to road infrastructure, but in relation to sewage infrastructure. So I'll come back to that afterwards, because obviously I'm just commenting on Mountain Road, and perhaps you could comment on the ratings that Barrett and David Wilson have put on it. We know from experience for High Beach Roundabout, at lunchtime when Greggs is busy, just people turning in causes congestion on the High Beach Roundabout, and the same thing will apply to the St Lawrence Road exit from the Mountain Road, which is nearer to the roundabout, because it will stop the flow of when a car comes out of that site. What will happen is that whichever direction they turn in, they will be blocking the flow in and out of that roundabout. So I think those things need to be more fully considered. So, I'd say I appreciate a lot of work's gone into it, but we haven't got the road infrastructure that we need in this plan, and it's not realistic to say everybody's going to use active travel measures, particularly when we've got a more elderly population. And although some of us are fitter in our old age than others, I do think that some elderly people can't be walking and cycling. They're reliant on their car. The public transport system isn't good enough. I mean, for example, there's 2 pensioners in Mathen, and they have to wait for the Saturday shoppers bus to come out in and out because they feel it's too much to walk from Mathen Village to the A48, which is only a short walk. So I don't think you're appreciating either the demographics or the need to cover this traffic congestion issue. Thank you. And then I'd like to comment on the Shy Newton site afterwards. Thank you.
Yeah, before you do, could you just confirm to me 2,000 pages was your statement, and how many comments? I just missed that bit.
I think there were, for example, on road infrastructure, there was 19 references and only 1 in the main body of the report. And on the traffic congestion, there was 17 and there was only 2 in the main body of the report. And I think one of them actually didn't refer to a residential development, it referred to an intensive poultry site. So obviously the consultation responses that are coming back are not taking account of this real need. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Griffiths and Craig, would you like to?
If I could lead and then Craig follow. The references that Councillor Brown made to Mountain Road site referred also to a site about a quarter of a mile away called the Bayfield site. Just to share the history on this, both sites were offered for consideration in 2020. We took the view that only one site was appropriate rather than the two. In the first preferred strategy in 2022, we identified the preference for the Bayfield site. A lot of people living around that site responded negatively. We appraised the sites again. I came to the view that Mountain Road site had the potential to be more integral to the town. Both sites would add the impact of 150 homes on traffic flows to the High Beach roundabout. I'm not persuaded that one site adds any more impact than the other, although the access to Mountain Road would need to be designed well. The references to road infrastructure, the lack of them in the report, deposit plan we've always asked should be considered alongside the local transport plan. And the local transport plan is a published document which has been considered and is available to all. High Beach Roundabout, as we've said, is currently the subject of a further well-tagged study, and all of us are looking forward to the results of that. We continue to press on the improved access to the M48. I think that will be important. And we had correspondence only this week from Welsh Government Minister saying that access should be considered as part of the regional transport plan, which is currently being undertaken. No veto on that there. So those are important issues and they affect the existing populations. It is not the role of the RLDP to provide answers to those existing issues.
I believe Councillor Brown would like to point to order now.
No, it's not a point of order. It's just could I come back afterwards? Thank you.
Of course you can.
Of course you can. Sorry. That's your role to decide.
I wouldn't expect anything less of any of you, okay?
That's okay. Okay. So those are issues. I'm not persuaded that we should not resolve issues of land availability for housing and employment until each and every of those issues is resolved first. That strikes me as a way forward that we cannot pursue. The references, very briefly, made to Fairfield Maybe. This was a site developed by the previous administration being completed now. It's got issues, as far as I'm concerned. There's not enough affordable housing, although it's interesting that the affordable housing now coming on is a lot higher standard than the market housing on that site. But I actually think in terms of urban design, congratulations to everyone involved. I think it's an exemplar design of urban living in one of our significant towns. And those who haven't been there, I'd encourage you to go and experience what design can achieve. There were lots of concerns. I've looked over the consideration over the transport impact of that site, the ways in and ways out of that site. It's a site of 300 homes, equivalent to what we're considering. The access looks as though it would be impossible. It functions remarkably well. It's under a narrow railway bridge at the back of Chepstow. I have never seen any traffic backing up into or out of that site, or indeed backing up in access to the A48. It's an interesting example of how everyone feared the worst, and yet none of it has actually transpired in the lived experience of the people on that site. So well done everyone involved there, and I think it's well worth a visit by those who have not been there. So having congratulated Craig and his team for delivering that site, I'll hand over to you, Craig.
Thank you, Councillor Griffiths, and thank you, Councillor Brown, for the questions and queries. High Beach Roundabout, as Councillor Griffiths has said, is part of the Welsh Government's trunk road. So unfortunately, Monmouthshire haven't got any powers to change or make any amendments or mitigate any of the current impact that's going on there. But as Councillor Griffiths has said, the Welsh Government have committed to delivering those studies, and it is foremost to look for solutions and ways to mitigate the existing traffic congestion on that roundabout. And there are ways and methods that are being explored and reviewed for High Beach Roundabout ultimately. In terms of where this reference in the planning policy, it is within the infrastructure delivery plan in Appendix 8. In the planning policy for Mountain Road, there is an area of land to be safeguarded for any improvements to ensure that can happen, which is positive. So I can assure you that the impact of the development on High Beach Roundabout is being significantly considered as part of the proposals, and as we move forward with the well-tagged study with Welsh Government, we will realise what those solutions are and what the improvements will potentially be for High Beach, and the development will incorporate that as well. So it's ensuring that they both speak to each other and there's a relationship between the development and High Beach Roundabout, and in policy in the deposit plan that is outlined quite clearly within the planning policy allocation and also within the infrastructure delivery plan in Appendix 8. And that certainly needs to be keep working on, and those solutions will find themselves as the plan develops ultimately. In terms of the reference to the previous LDP and improvements to High Beach Roundabout, I've asked Rachel, my colleague, to have a look into the historic details of that. I might have to come back with you after this meeting ultimately in terms of why those weren't implemented. But the original allocation meant for High Beach for Fairfield maybe was a lot higher. So I think it was 600 dwellings or 450. It was significantly more than has been allowed on the site. So the traffic movements would have been significantly more than what has been established as part of that development proposal. So that's maybe the reason why those improvements weren't made as part of the previous consent. But I'll have to look into that and come back to you ultimately, Councillor Brown.
Councillor Brown?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I believe for that site, the highways assessment was actually done before the tolls went, and I think obviously that made a difference to it. But I mean, we already know that we've got an existing problem for that roundabout, and I don't think it's unreasonable. And obviously, you can do it within planning terms to make that a site-specific requirement, and I don't think that is an unreasonable request, because you have done it in the past and you've put about traffic flows and so forth. So that has been part of a planning policy, and I think it's important that you actually put this contingency in on High Beach Roundabout improvements. And I don't think it's unreasonable. There were no well-tagged studies then, but there was just a recognition of the need for highway improvements. And so I don't think you have to wait for well-tagged studies to actually know that practically on the ground there is an issue, and even the well-tagged study 1 from Welsh Government recognised the need for improvements there and did put the option of the need for the land on the Mountain Road site to develop it. And I appreciate that you've reserved that, but it should have been, the road infrastructure things should be a lot stronger on site-specific requirements, and I think that applies across the board in relation to this plan, because we already know in Caldicot-Chepstow area that we've got quite a significant traffic congestion problem, and even if you have everybody in an electric vehicle, you'll still have the queues, and even if you have improved public transport, the buses will still be in the queues, so you won't solve that issue through public transport. And I think it's just being realistic on what's going to happen in reality to adding extra housing in particular areas. I wanted to come back on the Shire Newton site, or maybe I should do that after Laura spoken, should I? Thank you.
I just want to check that everybody's happy with what you've just said, and do they want to come back? Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Brown, for those additional comments. I think that the problem is at the moment, in terms of, as you said, we've in the planning policy at the moment, it is saying that the area will be safeguarded and that there will be room to the development to incorporate any mitigation that goes on at Highbury roundabout. The problem is we don't know what those solutions and mitigations are at the moment, to specifically reference them in the plan. This is an iterative process, the development of the replacement plan, so if those details become available as we move forward and as part of the consultation process, additional wording could be in that policy to beefing it up and to make it more stronger, then we can certainly explore that with elected members. That's certainly in our gift. In terms of the infrastructure plan at the moment, it discusses the access point onto the A466. It talks about improvements to Highbury roundabout, which we don't know what they are yet, but that can be built into it. Speed limit revisions along the A466, and then offside highway infrastructure contributions as well. So I can assure you that the development is not being considered in isolation from Highbury roundabout, and it's very much looking at them together and working with Welsh Government to look at those solutions and look at opportunities potentially. But I wanted to reiterate that this is an iterative process, so as we move forward, hopefully more detail and more information will come forward, which could be reflected in the policy then at that stage.
Okay, thank you. Right, so Councillor Wright, would you like to go forth, and then if you'd like to come back, then afterwards Councillor Brown?
I don't mind if Louise wants to carry on. I'm perfectly happy to wait.
Okay, Councillor Brown, after you.
Okay, thank you, Laura. I hope you're not getting bored with the contributions. Yeah, I just wanted to focus on the Shire Newton site, which obviously is in my ward, and it's 26 houses, and just wanted to clarify a few facts. I understand that the village boundary has changed, so that possibly the previous houses, was it Clear Court site? I think there were about 11 houses there, and it seems as if they're no longer within the village boundary. So I'd like to clarify whether those 11 houses go and then there's 26, or there's 26 and 11, because I'm not quite clear on that particular point. With regard to that particular site, the problem that we've got in Shire Newton, Pulmeric, Mathern Mountain area is that we've got one sewage pipe that basically covers the whole of the area, and the problem that we've got is that that comes from the Shire Newton Minithback area, and basically it's, you know, it's obviously part of main supply, but the pipe is inadequate. I've worked hard to get £100,000 worth of pipe lining repair, but it's still not repaired. So what happens is that there's a field in Pulmeric where there's manhole covers, and when the water table rises, the sewage comes out of the manhole covers, and we've got bales of hay around it to collect that sewage. And you can also see that at Mountain Brook there's extra growth of vegetation near the brook itself. I've been having meetings with Welsh Water over the last 3 or 4 years, and the problem is still not resolved. Initially, they basically said that there was a moratorium on house building in that area, the Water Board did, until there was an extra pump near St Tudoric's Church in Mathern. There has been an extra pump, but I have had locals recently say to me in September that there's an odour coming from that, and we have again had bales of hay round there collecting the sewage. So this problem has not been solved, despite the fact that every few months we have meetings with Welsh Water and also NRW. We've asked, I can recall asking a representative of NRW if they actually monitored the discharges into Mountain Brook, and the answer I got was we haven't got the resources to do that. So this is a problem, and obviously with regard to climate change, you know, we're trying to do everything we can not to pollute our brooks. It then goes into the Severn Estuary and then into the sea. So I think it's something that really needs to be sorted out before there's any additional housing in this area, because, you know, basically it can't sustain what it's got, and it's a 1960s pipe dealing with, I think the pipe's too small, but I mean, I think the Water Board think it's, Welsh Water think it's probably too expensive to actually, you know, replace it and get a proper pipe for it. I think with regard to the Shire Newton, the 26 houses, I presume that, you know, 50% of those would be affordable, and one of the things I would be interested in knowing about is to ensure that they are available to local people in the ward area, because obviously Shire Newton is probably one of the most expensive areas in Monmouthshire, and I think the difficulty is obviously if local families want their young children when they grow up to be able to live there, there isn't the affordability of houses. And I know that the housing market assessment is actually too broad for this, and I did actually make comments when it came to committee, you know, because it looks, you know, Chepstow area in general, and it doesn't look at the village communities as such. So I'd want to ensure that, and one of the comments that came back from, I think the Community Council did a village survey, is that we're not just talking about you know, two and one bedroom houses. We're talking about 3-bedroom houses as well, because if you've got a growing family, a young family, you're talking about the 20 to 40 age group, then, you know, they need that extra space for the nursery and for guests and so forth. I mean, the problem with the site, the 11 houses, I mean, I think they got outline planning permission, and then it came back again, and I don't think it's been determined yet, but I presume it's outside the village boundary now. But on that one, you had ginormous market houses of about 5 bedrooms, and then you had these minute affordable housing, you know, squashed in. And, you know, I don't think in terms of, you know, in terms of a good mix of housing, and even I think even the housing officers from our side actually said, well, you know, you need more of a mixture of 3, 2 and 1. So if you're targeting this age group of 20 to 40, I think instead of just thinking about 1 and 2 bedrooms, I think you need to think about, you know, possibly 3 bedrooms as well. But, you know, okay. I'd like to hear your feedback on that. And again, I suppose in the same sense that I said about the Chepstow sites being contingent on High Beach roundabout improvements, I would like the site for Shire Newton to be contingent on sewage infrastructure improvements. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Councillor Griffiths and then Craig, or was it Craig and then Councillor Griffiths?
Craig knows more about sewage pipes than I do.
I'm not sure where that leads to, and I don't think we want to know. Poor Craig.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Brown, for the questions. Very much talking to an existing problem, an existing situation there with existing sewerage, and happy to take that away from this meeting, ultimately investigate with Welsh Water and Natural Resources Wales to ensure that that isn't having an environmental impact, and they are doing everything they can to resolve the situation. With regards to the allocation in the deposit plan, we certainly have already, as part of conversations in terms of allocation, spoke to Welsh Water, spoke to Natural Resources Wales. They are aware of the sites, and we've asked them to raise comments. They haven't raised any comments with regards to the existing assets in Shire Newton, but maybe with the information that you've got, Councillor Brown, we can have that conversation, and happy to try and facilitate the conversation between all parties ultimately and see if we can get that resolved, and look at that from the allocation point of view. So there aren't any objections at this stage to additional development proposals in Shire Newton, but again, more than happy to work with you on that, to try and work with those other organisations. In terms of the comments with regards to the eastern side of Shire Newton with the Clearview Court, yes, you are correct, Councillor Brown. The development boundary has changed, and that's housing allocation would come out of the plan, so it would just be the new allocation in 26. And this is for all members ultimately in terms of allocations which haven't delivered as part of the existing LDP or the LDP which ended in 2021. If they haven't delivered the affordable housing we need for our rural communities, they have been taken out. So those landowners who were looking for additional profits or additional capacity, who haven't been able to bring those sites forward, we have removed those. So these new sites have been assessed in terms of viability assessments to evidence they can deliver the 50%, and those new landowners are engaged. So we've taken the view that if they haven't delivered over the last 10, 15 years, then they shouldn't be reallocated for development. We need to provide the housing infrastructure to our rural communities ultimately. So yes, Councillor Brown, you are right, this would be the only site. And what I would suggest with that is that it doesn't mean that that site can come forward, because obviously at the moment we're still working within the existing local development plan framework where it is an allocation. Until this replacement plan is adopted, a site could still come forward on that site. I think, and in terms of the housing mix, yeah, we referred to that earlier in the presentation. I totally agree with what Councillor Brown is saying. We do need a variety of different housing options for our rural communities, and that consists of 2, 3, 1-bedroom properties ultimately to serve the affordable housing market and the private market as well. So not just about delivering people who are on our housing waiting list, and the affordable housing will be allocated in line and working with an affordable housing officer. So they will be assessed in terms of their local needs, their local connections. We work very much with the Housing Rural Enabler, David James, who goes out and speaks to people in the rural areas in terms of what housing need there is, and we will work with them to allocate the housing to those people. So those direct connections and relationships are formed. So it is very much a local person first approach to that. And again, I agree with Councillor Brown in terms of that we need that housing mix, and that's why we do have that policy within the deposit plan to deliver that.
Okay, Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I think the problem with the Welsh Water issue is that they have this system in relation to development proposals whereby if the pipe itself has got capacity, then in development comments they sort of give a green light. But the problem is that in relation to this particular pipe, over years on end, they haven't managed to repair it properly. I mean, they've done bits and bobs of extra work to try and make it better. But the problem is we're still getting the problem of the sewage discharge. So that's in practical terms, what is needed is capital investment in a new pipe. And the issue is that they're not making that capital investment. And if they're repairing a pipe, they say, we can't respond to developmental proposals to say that we give that a moratorium and a red light. Having said that, they did that previously in relation to the pumping station that was supposed to solve the problem and hasn't done. So.
Okay, thank you. Any come back on any of that, or we're happy?
Only Chair and Councillor Brown to say that we will work with Welsh Water, and obviously it's their asset that we'll work with them to ensure that infrastructure and take their comments on board ultimately. But I'm more than happy to take that conversation away from this meeting, and we can work with Welsh Water and LW to ensure that see what improvements can be made ultimately.
Okay, thank you. Right, move on to Laura, please.
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, obviously, thanks to Paul and to the officers for all their massive amount of hard work on this plan. I think the overall strategic aim is excellent. I mean, we really do need to encourage more working age people and retain younger people here in this county. I mean, the decline in school-age population is really concerning, and I've got no doubt, I think there is no doubt, that the housing pressure and the associated high housing costs are playing a major role in this. There are younger people in my ward in central Abergavenny who I know are struggling to afford to live here, and they're likely to need to move if they want to start a family, or if they want to expand an existing family, or if they want to move from rental to home ownership. So I particularly welcome the plans for Abergavenny East that could help to ease this. They're in walking distance, largely walking and cycling distance from the ward that I represent. in all honesty, I think that for any proposed housing development, no matter the site, there will always be some coordinated and particularly vocal opposition to absolutely any house building. So, should this proposed RLDP go out to public consultation, I would like to know how we are going to ensure that the voices of people who actually intended to benefit from this plan are going to be heard. I mean, people working full-time and looking after young children are consistently underrepresented in local government. I mean, I think as one of those people mentioned in the 20 to 40 age bracket, we are an unfortunately rare beast in local government. And also excluded from the consultations run by them. So what are we going to do to meaningfully engage this group who have relatively little free time on their hands? And just lest anybody say, well, you wouldn't want any house building near you either. But right at the bottom of my garden here, there's 3 stories of flats being developed that look right into my house, and I think it's great. People need somewhere to live.
Okay, anybody want to comment on any of that?
If I can come in first on the consultation process, the decision to go out to public consultation will be made on October the 24th, but we haven't been waiting for that decision. A lot of work is going on to consider how we engage as many people and as many interests as we can in that consultation. There will be exhibitions in all the population areas, the towns and villages. There will be the online consultations, there will be the public meetings in each of those towns, there will be the drop-in opportunities in each of those towns. We're considering all ways of advertising those. The history of such public consultation, I would say, is not, well, I'm not talking about Monmouthshire, I'm talking about the United Kingdom, is not a good one. People tend to respond when they see the application for a planning application 5 years down the line when it's right next to their own home, and when they get the answer, oh, but this is part of the LDP, they say, what's that? The whole idea of a development plan is something that we've got to explain its significance and encourage people to actually engage at this particular stage. The efforts are certainly being made. One idea which we're going to follow up, it's okay saying that this particular community centre is going to be the place to drop in and see the exhibition. We're also going to need the gazebo on the high street, actually telling you that's where it is, so that that there is information which you can't avoid as you walk through the settlement, which is at least signposting you somewhere else. What I would add to that, to everyone here and anyone listening elsewhere from the council, is that the role of the local councillor for being a conduit from the community to us is indispensable, but also the role of the local councillor back. So the role of the local councillor in explaining to constituents that this process is taking place and what the opportunities are to engage. So this is not something separate to being a councillor, it seems to me. My last thought, in terms of getting a balance of views, we all had the experience that it is far easier to tap into those who are feeling threatened or opposed to a proposition, and far less easy to connect to those who are broadly in content or indifferent to the proposal. And so we need to watch that the voices we gain are as widely representative of the whole community as possible. A big challenge, but we are preparing for it, and I'm looking forward to wide engagement.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jackie Strong. Oh, Sorry, Councillor Wright, did you wish to come back? I do apologise.
That's fine. No, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Strong.
Thank you, Chair. I apologise for my voice, a bit croaky. Can I just reinforce some of the comments that Councillor Wright has just made, because I think we need to bear in mind why we're coming to creating this revised development plan, because we've got a bit of a crisis really in the county. We haven't got enough people of between sort of in their 20s to 40s to actually make our towns viable. And if we don't do something about where they're going to live, we're going to be even in a worse state sort of later on. So I just want to sort of thank Councillor Wright for her comments, because they're really sort of well timed. I also want to, and it seems quite a while ago since members of the public sort of talked to us at the beginning of this meeting, thank them for their contributions. I was particularly interested in the emissions and the fact that, Councillor Griffiths and Craig are going to re-look at that and see if there is anything that is missing from those investigations, because I think it's a really important issue. But my main point is Sevenside, County Cork East, north of Port Skewett. It's a really important piece of land. We talk about sort of green wedges around the county, but County Cork Castle is our jewel in our crown on Sevenside, really. And so we need to make sure that whatever we do to that piece of land is protected. It's vital that we have those houses, but it's also vital that we protect the Neddon. We are really aware, all of us that live very close to those properties, that County Cork Castle is starting to flood now. Walking through there the other day, you can feel the water coming up from below. So we need to protect the Neddon. It's all along those living levels. It's a really environmentally, it's a really sort of interesting landscape, so we need to protect that as well. So it's that balance, isn't it? It's that balance between getting those houses built for families to come and live, have a quality of life that we all enjoy, but also to make sure that we've got people that are going to be the care workers, the public servants of the future, the people having office jobs, remotely working in our light industry sort of buildings as well. So it's how we make that balance. So I just really welcome this huge report and lots of time and energy that the officers have put into it. And I really hope that we can get it out to consultation, make sure that as many of our residents as possible can actually contribute and make their views known to us, and then we can come back and discuss it again. But my main sort of kind of semi-question is, can I have some reassurance that we are going to protect the Neddon and the living levels? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Griffiths and Craig?
I'm eager to give that assurance that the Neddon and the greenland around the castle is not only protected in this plan, but is celebrated by this plan. I'll share with you a conversation we had with the Design Commission when we were looking at the Caldicot site and the interrelationship between the development site, potential development site, and the town itself. And the one sort of line was, how do you cross the barrier of the castle and its grounds with the new development, which floods? And the conversation was transformed by the suggestion, well, for heaven's sake, stop referring to it as a barrier, but refer to it as the buckle. It is the area of land which is going to connect the existing town from the new part of the town. And the more we see it as not a difficulty, but as an asset which is going to unite these two groups of people, the more we're going to be certain of protecting it and allowing people through it. And I think it's just, we've got a placemaking plan exercise envisaged for Caldicot. I'd love that placemaking plan to realise, it's not up to me, that the castle and its environment is at the core of this settlement and there to be celebrated and protected. It's also my grandchildren's favourite place in the county.
Well, that seems like a good reason. Okay, well, it's time for me, I'm afraid, guys. So if it's okay, I have some questions and thoughts. Firstly, I'd like to thank everybody for the report. It's huge in reading, very complex, and an awful lot of work's gone into it, so thank you. However, there's always going to be a however, isn't there? So in reference particularly to the site in Monmouth, CS 0270, the removal habitat is not going to be improving it. And I don't see how you can remove habitat and then say you put a buffer there and it improves it, because it can't, is my honest opinion. And I'd struggle with that concept straight away. Best quality land being removed rather than in another location. And in reference to the other location, we've already invested a huge amount of money to the active travel route down there in the bottom end of Monmouth, where also the majority of the jobs are. So it follows sense to me on that one. But when we also talk about that, I then think about the fact that in one of the presentations we did over the last few weeks, private presentations, sorry, not public ones, we talked about a green wedge and protecting our environment on view. And so my understanding from past times and how actually I became very interested in becoming a councillor is that my understanding views from the AOB, which of course is no longer called the AOB, it's called the Living Landscape. I think that's correct, is it? National Living Landscape, yes. And the word living there is important, I suppose, is the fact that it's highly visible as you come down the dual carriageway. So that is your welcome to Monmouth, welcome to Wales, and it's a lovely green site currently. And I personally have a problem with that. Then we talk about pollution. Now, one of the public speakers earlier on talked about the pollution and the Ella case. Now, this is really hugely important to us all, whether it's Chepstow, Monmouth, Caldicot, doesn't matter where, we need to address this pollution issue and what happens with it. And of course that means us driving electric cars, but in that own right, if we could go into the nitty-gritty of that, electric cars are also causing pollution in their making. However, moving on from that, because that's quite a big bit, transportation. So when we talk about that site in Dixton Road, or Leesbrook as you would like to call it, the roundabout there is already horrendously blocked frequently, and I take out the Welsh water equation, I'm just talking about in general, and if you have 2 houses per house on average and you've got 270 houses, so let's just round it up and make it a nice even 550 cars, and a large proportion of those trying to get out whilst the rest of them trying to get into school, and we've got the traffic lights queuing all the way back to the tunnels, and you've got the traffic queuing all the way down from Ross. It's a recipe for disaster as far as I can see. And then on top of that, you've got the proposed emergency exit of the site going out onto Hereford Road. How on earth is that supposed to be an emergency exit? I don't quite follow that one. For me, there isn't, there shouldn't be. Is an emergency exit in any of the other sites? For Kingswood Gate, Rockfield, etc., it's not necessary, and it's only going to turn into, and I'm going to quote a phrase that was written in one of the council officers' reports a few months back, a rat run, and I don't want that particularly. Anyway, moving on from that, we have the length of consultation and the timing of it. This is I've raised already a number of occasions. I'm very concerned at the fact that consultation is going to run into the middle of the depths of winter, and we just talked about a gazebo out on the high street. Well, people aren't necessarily going to be out there at that time. That's just for me, just thinking about it seriously, and the timings and length of it. Can we not extend it, please? Because it's really important that this, as the other members have made, it is really important that we actually get as much feedback, whether it's for or against, doesn't matter which. I'm open for all, but we do need feedback, and we need to encourage it. And if it's going up to Christmas, I question whether that will happen because everybody's busy, and I do worry about that. Sorry, I've got lots. Affordable housing, 250,000 is the one I pushed not so many weeks ago. I got told is roughly the price of an affordable house. With a 20% deposit, the average income required to service that is going to be £50,000 income. Now, that's a lot of money, whether it's one person or two people, to try and find that money and those jobs to support that in Monmouth. That, or anywhere else actually, that's a big ask. So if you've got a third on social rent and then a third on shared ownership and a third on private, at the average affordable housing being at £250,000 and £50,000 deposit, and then it needs 20% deposit, I should pardon me, and £50,000 for my working out. I might be wrong, but I think that's roughly where it is, and that's a lot. And if we're having all these things, the Section 106 money is surely going to be limited, because we're then moving from affordable housing to, because affordable housing has to be paid for, especially when we want zero carbon as well. So the question there. Shared ownership ends up being private in my experience. So they buy it off in tiers, and then lo and behold, we're back to square one. We no longer have affordable housing because it's gone back into the private sector. How do we guarantee, that's the next question, how do we guarantee, please, that the site does not grow further? Because that's a huge worry, because I don't see that. I foresee it going further. And I'm getting to the end, you'll be pleased to hear. Lack of infrastructure, it's been covered so well. It's so lacking. It's just is. And what's the last? And consultation, we've done that. So there you go. They're my questions, please. Sorry to be so long. Yes, I should say, who would like to answer those? I was sort of waiting for a chair to take it then, wasn't I? I do apologise.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Lucas, for your questions. I'll try and run through them. Please let me know if I haven't covered anything as I go through these. Quite a few questions there. So in terms of, I think the first question was around the site in Dixton, specifically in terms of the habitat and the loss of agricultural space. I think this is quite a crucial question ultimately for Monmouthshire as a whole, in terms of the amount of land that we have and the lack of brownfield sites. I think ultimately, if we are going to address the sustainability issues and provide essential housing and employment allocations within the replacement local development plan, unfortunately we haven't got those brownfield opportunities to build on. We have to allocate land on green fields. We have 97% or something like that of green fields within Monmouthshire. You know, we are a very green rich environment. The amount of land built on is about 3%. So ultimately, to solve this problem, to solve this conundrum of providing housing and employment opportunities for people, we are going to have to build on agricultural land, and we can't get away from that, unfortunately. The reference I was talking about in terms of enhancing habitat and enhancing that green space, that is evidenced within Planning Policy Wales at a national level. Every planning application has to do that. We've already talked about the evolution of the Dixton Road / Leesbrook site in terms of the reduction of it to ensure ensure that the impact of that development doesn't have an adverse impact on bat species within the area, particular bat species. And it's about ensuring that we do have that green corridor, so it is enhancing that, creating that green motorway ultimately for bats to use and to utilise for feeding and for roosting and for additional habitat opportunities rather than a field. So all of that is going to be fully considered as part of the proposal, and that's why the site has been reduced to accommodate that. In terms of future expansion, I know Councillor Scrutiny, you asked that question later on, but in terms of future expansion, I would suggest that that green corridor would be to the east of the site, would be the boundary then, it would be the boundary for Monmouth, and going any further than that would have a harmful impact on the bat species. So ultimately, although I cannot categorically in perpetuity say that there'll be no development, but because of that constraint, I would suggest that you couldn't go any further east in terms of that Monmouth town. Coming back to some other questions with regards to Monmouth. So we did talk about a green wedge, and there have been a review of green wedges in other areas of Monmouthshire. Monmouth isn't in that same area. In terms of green wedge allocations, that deals with the coalescence of settlements. So it protects green spaces to ensure that urban settlements don't coalesce into each other and become one urban sprawl. That isn't the case with Monmouth. Obviously, there isn't any specific urban settlements within the area, so you couldn't have a green wedge in that area. The other green wedge that has been allocated in Abergavenny region is because in national planning policy you can create a green wedge to protect national park, which obviously the Brecon Beacons National Park would be protected, but I can never say the Welsh version. Councillor Bryn's gonna reference me now. But it is that green wedge is to protect the area and the Brecon Beacons National Park ultimately. So unfortunately, there wouldn't be a need for a green wedge protection in the area of Monmouth. Is my point on that. I think we've covered off phosphates in terms of the water quality in the river. There is going to be a strategic phosphate solution in the treatment system. There was also reference to the emergency access. So that very much is an emergency access. That's certainly not open 24 hours a day, open to the public as a primary route. That is in the event of any emergency vehicles being able to access the site. So it might be used for pedestrian cycle links, but the vision is that would be closed ultimately. So it wouldn't be a rat run. It would be only in those very emergency circumstances where emergency facilities can get through if they need to at that site. There are other sites which do have similar access. Point Abergavenny East also has an emergency route. So other sites do have that where it is considered to be appropriate to enable that form of route, but they aren't open 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year. They are only in the event of an emergency. In terms of the consultation, it will be run over 6 weeks, and that is considered to be quite a significant amount of time. We've tried to avoid any half terms or any Christmas periods, any of those type of areas. Hopefully people will get engaged. We want to work with members as much as possible to how we reach out to people. I know in a recent member workshop I was asking for ideas of where we can hold the expeditioner dates. We want to hold them in the most appropriate places. We're planning to do them between 2 and 7 o'clock to try and catch people who go to school and also people who are work, trying to catch them after work as well. So we really want to try and engage with as many people as possible. We're also talking to the youth forum, want to speak to the comprehensive schools, go into them, speak to children, people. This plan is going to look to future generations, ultimately provide housing and jobs for them. So we want to go out and speak to them as much as possible. So any ideas that elected members have on how we can engage further, please send them through to us. We're happy to try and incorporate them as much as possible. Affordable housing. So in terms of affordable housing, so the 50% that would be delivered would be handed over to a registered social landlord. So they would be working, as Councillor Griffiths has said, to deliver the social rent and to deliver intermediate rent and to different housing options for people. So shared ownership, where people own 70% of the property, or vice versa, they might own a smaller proportion. This is actually how I got onto the housing market. So this is, I bought 50% of a property with a registered social housing landlord, and it is really successful ultimately in enabling people on smaller incomes to get onto that housing market. And I think this is what this plan does. It provides options for people. It provides affordable housing with the 50% from the registered social landlord, and also creating smaller properties as part of the private mix if people want to get onto that property market as well. So hopefully that will enable it. I do take your point, Councillor Lucas, about sometimes you can stay a ladder and you can buy the property, but I suppose that is that model ultimately in terms of being able for people to get onto the housing market on smaller incomes and staircase up. But we can certainly look at that and have those conversations with the affordable housing officer in terms of what options are available. The point was also made about Section 106 contributions. As we've discussed today, we are certainly looking for Section 106 contributions if there are recreational deficits in areas and we need support, and if the development puts a pressure on those areas, we will be asking for that financial contribution from the developer. That is outlined in the infrastructure delivery plan in Appendix 8. We will be seeking those contributions, be that for public transport, be that for recreational equipment. We will be seeking that from the developer, as well as the 50%, and that has been viability tested at this stage, and we will be working with those development partners to ensure that comes forward. And ultimately it will be the planning committee to make that decision when the application is given that full consideration. So elected members of the planning committee will be making that decision when it comes forward to them, looking at Section 106 contributions and see if they are relevant in accordance with the planning policy framework. We're not seeking to have a two-standard development here. We're looking to have our cake and eat it ultimately with those elements. I think that covers most of the questions, or all of the questions that you asked Councillor Lucas, but if there's anything I've missed, please let me know and I can cover off.
May I just go back? So you just said about brownfield sites. Well, there are some in Monmouth that need looking at. Bats, green wedge, well, surely their habitat is already there and therefore it should be protected at all costs, and it's a high valued area. Emergency access, I'm sorry, for needs use must, that, as we all know, won't be the case, and I have a huge concern about that for all my residents up in there. Okay, so that's for me. If you want to come back quickly on that, that's great, and then we can move to near the end of the meeting. Others will be pleased to hear.
Yeah, happy to come back, Councillor Lucas. Maybe just comment on the brownfield. I think I've covered off the others in terms of the perspective. But in terms of the brownfield, if there are sites that you think that we haven't considered, then please let us know and we can speak to the landowners if they want to promote them for development proposals. A lot of those brownfields are on floodplains, so they wouldn't be appropriate for housing proposals. But if there are any, I'm happy to explore them ultimately and work with the landowners if they want to bring them forward. But there haven't been any presented as part of the candidate site assessments to this date, so we can only look at the sites that have been promoted as part of the process.
Okay, thank you.
Just a couple of points.
Most certainly, Councillor Griffiths. Would I ever deny you?
Thanks, Craig, and I don't want to go over that again. A couple of points I want to focus on. The concern that is affordable housing affordable? I think is a proper concern. In the past, I've come across plenty of examples where it isn't. I'm confident of our proposals because they're based on the local housing needs assessment. They're based on the data. Broadly, 50% of the population can afford market housing, and that's what we're allowing. 17%, the data indicates, could afford low-cost home ownership, shared equity, in one way or another, and that's why we put that segment in there. But I've met the concern of members before where it's okay putting that segment in, but it reverts to market housing at the point of sale. We've discussed this at length with our housing teams. The practice in Monmouthshire at the moment, and we would continue it, is that in any form of intermediate housing of that sort, the property reverts back to the council at the point of sale. The difficulty we've had in the past, say back to the council or back to the social landlord who has been managing the shared equity, the difficulty we've had is that in seeking to find a new shared equity owner, we haven't marketed that opportunity well. And sometimes the conclusion has been reached, nobody's interested, and then it goes back on the open market. I've looked at that. We simply haven't done our job well enough to market those opportunities. We've used the housing register as the only form of marketing, and that's not the best way to do it. So having learned from experience, we will improve on that in the future. My second point, and only the last point, I've heard the arguments across councillors in this committee and council that with the stress that we're putting on affordable housing and zero carbon housing, that we will squeeze out the funding of Section 106 in the future. Again, I ask members to look at that Appendix 8, and you'll find there the schemes, the investments that will be required through Section 106 from the developer site by site. I've compared the amounts in that list to what has been achieved through Section 106 in equivalent developments in the recent past, and I don't find the squeezing out that members fear, i.e. the sums we'll be asking for in the future are comparing reasonably well with the sums that have been asked for in the past. So I think that bears looking at. Thanks very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, so what I propose to do right now is actually sum up, and then I'd like to ask everybody on how they feel about it as we sit now. So, in no particular order, just the order in which I've written things down. Councillor Dimmock's concerns was about active travel, the need for detail in the report. Portskeurt Ward has poor amenities, and the commuting traffic, commuters are going for the higher paid jobs in other places, therefore causing commuting traffic, and of course healthcare. Councillor Brown for the mountainside traffic congestion, and no mention of county-wide assessment, Fairfield site and High Breach roundabout. 2,000 pages of traffic report, 19 references on one issue and only 17 on the other. Mountain Brook sewage, particularly concerning there in the reference to having met with NRW and Welsh Water over the years and needing to use bales of hay to contain sewage. That's quite scary. Affordable housing for locals at reasonable size for growing families, which is really important view to take forward for us. Councillor Thomas Davis, concern for Abergavenny, to whether or not there's a master plan, land ownership and compulsory purchase considerations. Councillor Laura Wright, welcome plans for Abergavenny East, and how are the local voices going to be heard and how to engage. Councillor Tudor Thomas, Monmouth doesn't have a link to travel, or bus or train. So thank you very much, and concern about Aber East as well. And I assume for that he was referring particularly about transportation for active travel across. Councillor Jackie Strong, towns, houses for younger people, emissions from cars, comments from the public speaking, and appreciated those. Protect the Neddon and the castle, grounds, and of course the living levels. Balance is required. Councillor Bryn, no evidence on the effects of the current new homes already built in Monmouth, traffic growth, lack of public understanding of all that, dark skies, and of course reference to bats and the habitat because of that. So thank you for that. So now we've had substantial public input to this meeting, both in terms of speakers and written submissions, for which I truly thank you all. We've written forward the submissions to the Cabinet. We will write forward the submissions to the Cabinet and officers following today's meeting for their consideration. And thank you very much for all of that. And we thank the public for the input. We are not here to make decisions today, but the report's recommendations ask us to scrutinise the RLDP deposit plan in advance of the Council endorsing it to the publicly consulted on, and also to note the content of the revised delivery agreement timetable. We have done this today, and we now need to offer back feedback to the Cabinet member and officers on whether we can give support to this plan in its current form, and that's the important bit. Can I ask each member in turn of the committee of their view, and can they just tell me if they're for or against, please, as it stands? I hope that makes sense. Yep, so seeing as we're starting in this room, Councillor Strong, are you for or against? That was for? Sorry, you were a bit quiet.
Sorry, I forgot to put the microphone on for.
Councillor Bryn?
Yeah, can you clarify what we're going for again? There was a lot of words.
It was. I do apologise.
Yeah.
For me, that was amazing. All right, never mind anything else. So we're here to make recommendations. So do we agree with what we've got in the front of us, or do we wish for them to consider it further? Basically, in a nutshell. Yeah.
Okay, I'm for putting this to full council for them to discuss.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Brown.
Yes, I'm against putting it to full council because I think it needs to be accompanied by a site-specific requirement in relation to road infrastructure, and we need a lot more details on the county-wide transport assessment and also Highways England and Highways Wales on their assessment on High Beach Roundabout. But also, I think I would like to say that there's no reason why we can't have this information accompanying it, because the reason for referring to the Fairfield Maybe site was that in the current adopted plan, we have this site-specific requirements on road infrastructure at different sites. So I think it's important that that's included in anything that goes to full council. Thank you.
Okay, so just to be clear here, we're only recommending that we think there should be more done to this report, okay? Right. So we're just saying we wish for more to be done to this report.
Yeah, I think there needs to be more in relation to the site-specific requirements on road infrastructure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Councillor Dimmock.
Thanks, Chair. I'm not opposed to housing. It's very much needed. However, I agree with Councillor Brown on the concerns with the lack of detail. So I think further work needs to be carried out, if I'm honest, and for my residents and other residents across the county to accept these proposals.
Sorry, so was that for or against?
Against, Jane. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Thomas.
I'm very much for this report. Is comprehensive, and you know, how long do we keep going backwards and forwards? And we're under an obligation from Welsh Government to submit an RDLP on quite a tight timetable. So I'm very much for in its current form, and it goes to full council and probably to full public consultation.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Laura Wright.
Hi, yes, I'm in favour of this going to full council in its current form. You know, I'd like to see this proceeding to public consultation sooner rather than later, so I hope we can get on and start delivering affordable housing for people.
Okay, Councillor Thomas Davis.
Thanks, Chair. I associate myself with the comments of Councillor Dimmock and Councillor Brown, and also draw reference to my earlier reservations and concerns about the viability of the current master plan for Abergavenny East, and for those reasons I can't endorse the RDLP in its current form, and I would be disappointed if this was to be brought to full council. I'd rather we took some time to iron out some of these concerns and to address the very legitimate concerns that were so eloquently articulated by residents earlier this afternoon. So my preference is to pause and to iron out and to take our time to get this right, because as Councillor Dimmock said, we clearly recognise the need for housing. I want to see young families my own included, being able to set roots here and to see young people thrive and to set roots here in Monmouthshire. But this RDLP requires further work, in my view. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And for myself...
Perhaps just note that Councillor Crook isn't here now.
Okay. Just to note, Councillor Crook isn't here currently. And just to note for myself, I'm against because I feel that the same as my Councillor Thomas has just said, I feel that we need to go back and iron out a few of these issues. So there we go. Thank you. So I'll look to my colleague to my right. So, no, so it's 4 and 4. So there's no weight carried here in respect to how it goes forward. It's just our recommendations. So I wish the public to understand that. It's just a recommendation. It's no actual weight other than that to it. It's just we recommend that, okay? Thank you very much. I'll just clarify with my colleagues to my right. That's all acceptable. And thank you very much, everybody, for the amazing power of concentration. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, yes, before we wrap up, we need to adjust the rest of the agenda. We nearly tried it. I'm sorry, guys, not allowed to escape just yet. Right, very quickly, one hopes. So forward list, forward planning action list. Yes.
Just on that, just to say, Councillor Bryn, you'd sent an email asking about the parking review to be included, and just to let you know that that has been put on the programme now, so we will keep an eye on that. We don't have firm timescales yet, but it's on there, so once we know more, we'll know more, but it is on there now.
Okay, and then item 6, Cabinet and Council forward plan. That's just a note. And to confirm the minutes of the previous meetings of the 11th of July, 24th of July and the 3rd of September. I propose to accept them. Has anybody got any comments about these minutes or any wishes to add or detract or anything worried about them? No? Can I look for a second, please? Just happy to confirm?
Councillor Wright.
Councillor Wright, are we all happy to accept? Can I just take a nod of hands and eyes? Yeah, great, thank you. And finally, be pleased to hear, I get it right this time at last, the next meeting will be the 7th of November. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.